Today on the ONS podcast, we are honored to have two guests. We have a returning guest that has been on this podcast before. You know him as Chase Pettey, the adventure trainer. And then we have a new one, Meghan Obrien. Meghan is a certified neuromuscular therapist and a muscle specialist. In this podcast, we talk from common sports injuries, how to bring your body up to optimal function, and everything in between. I really, really enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you guys do as well. TJ, I don't have any boogers in my nose, do I?
Oh my gosh, look your eyes.
Open up your nose.
Dude, I had an eye booger in one of our podcasts. I think it was yours. The whole goddamn time. I'm just staring at this white piece of shit right here. I'm like,
I saw it. I thought you wanted it there. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Probably did, asshole. I'm like, Chase, rolls up at 5:45 looking all good. I'm like in a hat and t-shirt.
Yeah, you were like, fuck.
Yeah. God damn it. All right, guys. Well, welcome to the ONS podcast. We've got a repeater here on the podcast today. It is Chase Pettey, and we've got a new guest today. Her name is Meghan Obrien. So on this episode, we are going to be talking about sports injuries, ways, and you could see Chase is in a sling here, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But we're going to talk about sports injuries. We're going to talk about repair and recovery after a major sports injury. And Meghan, why don't we start with you as far as your background and what your specialty is and why we brought you here on the ONS podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me here. I'm super excited. So I'm a state licensed massage therapist that just has over the years been really obsessed with continuing education. So it's really my only credential. I am a neuromuscular therapist, which is a type of deep tissue massage. And then I went through a year-long program that was really based in applied and some clinical kinesiology. So it was really the study and understanding of how the nervous system functions, how the muscular system functions, and how those two function together really well, along with a ton of super specific anatomy and physiology and understanding joint mechanics and things like that. And then I've also gone through a very specific, again, super specific education on personal training. Okay. It's a resistance training specialist program. And it really focuses on the physics of exercise so that we can learn how to be really appropriate and effective, safe trainers.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot. That's a mouthful. Let's keep that mic right here. Let's move that up just a little bit. Perfect.
Good.
So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And I want to break some of that stuff down because I understood about 30% of the words that you said. So, but getting over to Chase too. Chase.
Hey.
So you're back.
I am back.
Dude,
I am back. Yes.
Yeah. So, hey TJ, my microphone just okay. So. You're part of the ONS team now,
yes.
Which were before the podcast. When we did the podcast last, yes. You were not.
Correct.
And so I'm super happy to have you on the team.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to tell your story in an athlete spotlight and do that whole thing. But something has hindered that video.
Yes.
As you can see, you're in a sling. You know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
Looks great. Matches the ONS shirt.
Kinda.
Yeah.
It's
kinda,
blue. They're both in the blue family. But what happened?
Well, first off, I want to say thanks for having me be a part of the ONS team. I know we had a big talk about that, and I just, anybody listening, just, your vision and deeper understanding of just your brand and what you're really trying to do is just on a deeper level than just clothing. So I respect that, and that's why I'm very grateful for being a part of this, first off.
Well, we're really happy to have you, man.
And I'm in a sling because let's see. All right, I'll be honest with you guys. I'll tell the real story. So one story was I was doing a triple backflip. Another one was I was doing a 360. But let's be honest. So I was on the mountain snowboarding, and I was shooting other athletes.
Okay.
And
where were you guys?
We were in Breckenridge, Colorado.
Okay.
And really it just comes down to the perfect storm. We were there for 5 days, and I wasn't out there for half days, from 8 a.m. first one on the mountain till 4 p.m. last one on the mountain. We're snowboarding all day long, and 5 days in a row. It's the 5th day where we've been riding all morning, catching shots, and I needed to get those last shots I needed for some, marketing content we were doing. And it was actually the last run we were doing with the video.
That's how it goes, right?
Of course. So I'm following the skier down, and we make a transition to the right, and I kind of hit this jump and more like just a mound, and I got air, but since I was paying attention to the camera and not me, when I landed on my edge, and just within a matter of fraction of a second I went down. But since I was holding the camera, I tried to tuck to protect the camera and landed on my shoulder, and literally as I was falling, I could hear it. I could hear everything, just like, and I went to go grab my shoulder, and when I grabbed it, it was, my collarbone was here. So I was like, wait, that's not supposed to be there. And the athletes were like,
it wasn't out of your skin though, right?
But it was just pushing the skin up. And it was funny, the athletes were like, come on man, get up. And I'm like,
you're not bleeding, you're fine.
I'm like, I can't move my arm, like I'm not getting up. And if you guys go on, you'll see some photos of like the ski instructors and stuff that were all kind of helping me. They're all posing around me. We're taking pictures as I'm laying on this. When it happens, it was kind of, okay, my mind immediately goes to, okay, it happened, so just make the best of it from here, and I was in that moment. But yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. As you guys know, I'm the adventure trainer, so
you got to have these things.
Yeah, it's inevitable that but I always tell people, you can get injured stepping off a curb, driving a car, being safe in a gym. Things happen, and we just have to look back at those and learn from them, and just listen to our body. I was, again, 5 days on the mountain, and it was just a matter of I couldn't, just my legs were tired, I was tired, wasn't paying attention, and just be safe, when you're out there.
So did they actually come in and like put you on a stretcher that they can ski down the mountain?
Mountain Uber.
There you go. Most expensive Uber you're gonna ever have.
Oh yeah. But it was like the black edition, not like the basic, Uber. It was pretty sweet. We had 2 people come, and again, like I have a video of I was like, again, you got to catch all this, like them putting me in the sling, a video and everything. And so yeah, I call it the burrito. That's what I call it. So they lay you in this thing, and then they sling you up, but then they just wrap you in this like tarp. So you're literally only
is it just your head?
Yeah, just your head sticking out. So you're like, again, it looks like you just wrapped in a burrito. And yeah, man, like they did a great job. One guy's behind me, kind of controlling the speed. One girl's in front of me, and they take me all the way down the mountain. But don't get me wrong, it's, as well as they did, it's also the most uncomfortable ride you'll ever have in your life.
I can imagine.
You're already in so much pain, and you're hitting bumps.
Yeah.
And like,
there seems like there's like no like cushion on those things either.
Oh no.
Like you're gonna feel every single bump.
Every little bump. And then they keep, are you all right? And you're like, yeah, I guess. Just get me down this mountain. And of course we're on a double black, so it's a long ride down the mountain.
I was gonna ask that, like how long was the ride down the rest of the mountain?
Probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because once they got me down to the blues, they were able to hook me up to a snowmobile and then go. But above that, it's too steep. They can't hook you up. You'll end up catching more speed than the snowmobile, and they'll be like, oh, so yeah, So yeah, it was an experience for sure. But I think we talked about this last time I was on here. I experienced a really bad back injury when I was younger.
Yeah.
So as far as going through the rehab process mentally, I was already like, okay, I at least know what I'm going to experience through this. And I try to, I'm pretty optimistic. I try to find I think I texted you the day it happened, and I was like, listen, man, let's make lemonade out of lemons,
Yeah.
And this will help me just, again, in another aspect, better understand and better relate with clients that have had shoulder injuries or are going through this themselves. I can actually legitimately say, I truly know what you're going through, instead of trying to understand what they're going through.
Well, that's what like immediately impressed me about your injury, because it was like literally it was either the day of or the next day.
Mm-hmm.
We're texting back and forth. I was like, dude, I saw that you got hurt, how's everything going? And you're just telling me how you're going to make a series out of it, that you're going to, keep your mindset right. This is just a setback, but you're going to make
a comeback,
a lemonade out of lemons, And so I was just like so impressed with your ability to just be optimistic through something like this, because a lot of people would just get really down. Like when your life centers around fitness or a sport, and then you all of a sudden can't do that sport for a long time, or anything for that matter, like that's got to be a mind.
Well, and again, and I do want to say this, everybody listening, is that, that was my mindset the day of and the day after, and if it's something you want to get into, it was about 8 days after the injury. is really when I had, and ever since then I've been fine, but I had 2 days that I was like in my head hardcore. But it was more, I was just dissecting like the execution plan and just really setting the standard of being patient. You know me, I'm a go-getter, so sometimes it's hard to be patient, you know? And so I had a couple of days by all means where I was in my head and down on myself, and, you know, it is a part of the process, but you can't sometimes fight those urges. You kind of just need to sometimes be in that moment. Yeah. So you can actually work through it. You know, you can't just pretend like it didn't happen, you know? So I definitely had my couple of days of just being really down on myself. But, you know, Meg and I will get into that, honestly. It was once I made my decision not to have surgery, again, once I decided not to have it, that's when me and Meg sat down and we were able to put a plan together. And that's really when the optimism happened again. It was like, when I have a plan and execution, I'm ready to take it on. It was just that middle ground of gray area where I was like, what am I going to do? I was trying to make a decision between surgery or not. So that was where I was struggling of like, what do I do?
What's your official, like diagnosis, like what happened?
Yeah, so it's a grade 3/4. It was right in between there, and it's one of the most controversial injuries in sports as far as that grade. You know, 1 or 2 is for sure no surgery. Okay. You know, for sure grade 4 to 6 is you're definitely having surgery. You know, there's certain grades where they know, like, I can give you your options, but like you're doing this. Where the grade 3 or 4 is you can read any article you want out there, talk to any doctor you want. It just comes down to here's the options, and then here's the maybes and could-haves and possible and all, you know, all those things of just could happen. You could be stronger, you could not be, and it really just comes down to where are you at in your head, and you know, what do you want to do? You know, just kind of making that decision.
And so you're right in between those 2 grades of like surgery, no surgery.
And no surgery. And because at the end of the day, you know, just so people understand what happened is, you know, it's a AC joint tear, but, you know, you have, you know, 2 joints here. Do you want to actually say the technical names of them? It's like a you say
a acromioclavicular
yes,
ligament.
Which is like a capsule, right, that connects to your scapula.
Yep, it's just a ligament, which is a piece of like connective tissue.
And then there's the ligament here that connects to the actual clavicle
which is the coracoclavicular
there you go.
ligament.
So I use the abbreviations like AC joint, you know, and then people are like, what's the name? I'm like, Meg. You know? So, so, you know, basically I tore both of them. So there's no, you know, orthoscopic surgery. They have to cut you. You know, they have to go in there since they both completely tore. So basically my clavicle is just floating now. There's no joint stability at all.
Really?
So, you know, my rotator's fine. So anything below parallel, I'm still very, very strong. But once I kind of start to get above parallel, you have to elevate. You know, at some point your shoulder needs to elevate. And that joint used to, like a rubber band, kind of pull that arm up.
Yeah.
Where the minute that happened, all of a sudden, even just hanging my arm, the only thing stabilizing that now is all my surrounding muscle tissue. There's no more joint stability. So it really comes down to really strengthening this muscle tissue through all angles, you know, all rotations, internal, external, etc., to be able to do the things I want to do for the rest of my life, being the adventure trainer, so that I can continue to live the life the way I want to live it. So, and that's where kind of Meg comes in.
I was going to say, this is a perfect segue to you, Meg. Chase has been talking for a long time, so we're gonna pause him for a little bit.
Right.
So what were your thoughts when Chase called you and told you about his injury? I mean,
oh man, it was like, what are we gonna do about this?
Were you surprised at how long it took him to get hurt with all the adventure stuff he does with climbing mountains and skiing and snowboarding and doing all this stuff?
Totally, like in the things that really interest him and excite him, like that stuff really happens like often. You know, people really get these like big injuries. But like that being said too, like over the years of like being at Definition Fit together, like we've gotten to know each other pretty well, and like Chase is a pretty level-headed, like smart trainer. So, and like him and I like work together quite a bit. Like I work with him a lot, even when he's healthy, and you know that work alone like keeps his system functioning really well. So when your system's functioning really well, like you can kind of get away with more and not get injured.
Okay.
And that's like really like my whole goal for my whole practice with people is like, let's get your system functioning at a level so that you can do the things that you really love to do. And rather than those things like beating you up and tearing you down and making you weak and injured and things like that, that they actually like, I mean, at the bare minimum, like you can do them and you feel fine.
Right.
But instead, like, they actually help to, like, strengthen and build your system.
So expand on that a little bit. You say system functioning. What does that mean?
Okay, so like when I say that, what I mean, like, you know, there's a million different contexts for
Right.
something like that, but like what I mean is like having your muscular system be healthy, like having like our muscles' job are to like move our limbs and stabilize our joints. So for me, like if your muscular system is contracting really well consistently, then you're going to have more stability. You're going to be able to like put on more strength, and then like you can do more without like the impact of like that movement on your joints being like, you know, like how many times does your hip rotate in a lifetime? Like if that's all working really well, then you won't have as much wear and tear on that joint.
So the muscle acts as like a base layer for the joints, so that way all the weight is not necessarily dependent or the joint is not carrying all the weight. The muscle is kind of carrying along with it.
Totally. Like so like I'll just steal an example from like my educational process is like, so we have like a joint, which is like bones, and then there's like connective tissue, like bursas, joint capsules, ligaments, things like that we call like passive support structures. So those are like the things like last result, like this is going to try to protect and control your joint. And then we have what's the active support structures, which are like your muscles. So those are the things that contract and like move you and try to stabilize your joints actively. So it's kind of like in your like a car's a really good example.
Okay,
for, like,
perfect.
bodies.
Yeah.
That's the one.
So like if you're in your car, like you have a steering wheel, right? And like you're driving down like this curvy mountain road, and there's usually like a guardrail. So it's like your muscles are the active control, like your steering wheel, and the connective tissue, the ligaments, the joint capsules, things like that, that's a support structure. So that's like the guardrail.
Okay.
So say like your steering wheel falls off in your hands, like you have that kind of, oh no, like run into the guardrail, like hopefully we don't go off the edge of the mountain kind of thing.
Okay.
So in his case, like he has no more of that guardrail anymore. And so it's really important.
Who needs it?
Yeah, way to go, man.
We designed them for no reason.
Yeah.
Throw it in there.
So, but does it work that, you know, so you got these guys that are bodybuilders that carry a lot of muscle on them, but you see them have joint issues.
Yeah.
So is there a tipping point as far as, you know, let's keep a healthy amount of muscle, but let's not carry too much muscle, or is it, because it doesn't work, more muscle you have, the healthier your joints? Because I see that all the time. I mean, guys have joint issues when they're lifting for a long time.
Yeah, this is an awesome question. So, right, like, just because you look a certain way has no indication of what's really going on, like, beneath the skin and like what's happening in your joints and with your system. So like you can get really good at training like your biceps, like we were talking about this morning, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything around that joint structure is working well. So like, yeah, maybe you have really strong, really bulky biceps, but what other things are around that joint that maybe aren't working as well as they could be? So it becomes like a compensation. Like a lot of times, like you'll see people that have, I mean, there's so much, like it even depends on like your, like the actual physical joint structure, like the shape of your bones, like how like your muscles will develop. But that's
because there's like the three different like endomorph. What are the three?
Mesomorph, ectomorph.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, not at all. That's
just
like a whole other thing.
Okay.
No, so like if you have like, so your rotator cuff, right? Like people kind of familiar with like
picking on the shoulder. Okay.
Those muscles. So like if say two of those muscles are functioning really well and maybe two of them are not, like the ones that aren't functioning really well, like they're not going to be able to put on the mass for one. Like so if you're in bodybuilding, like your concern may be more with like the bulkiness, like the mass of the tissue, and not really the function. But if it's not contracting well and contracting well on demand, like you're never going to be able to strengthen it, let alone like put on mass. But like you don't know that that's going on like underneath the skin. So like, you know, we're really good at compensating, and particularly if you're really attached to like a certain image, like people figure out a way to get like those really round deltoids and
right,
things like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, it doesn't necessarily mean, it means that those muscles, like you're getting them to contract at least some of the time, like, but like my goal with people is always just to get like the whole like system, like the way the muscular system and the nervous system communicate together, like getting that that communication system as clear and as consistent as possible. And then that, like, because there's like small little muscles too that like we don't really go after to train for like bulk purposes or like a look kind of purpose, but they're really important
for like stability or okay.
Like what did you tell me the other day? There's like, you know, you're like, listen, like to do this movement with, you know, the shoulder is one of the most advanced joints in the body, right? So you were telling me there's, you know, 40 something muscles that basically do this movement, you know, and basically like you're saying, if 5 of those aren't firing out of the 40, like your body's just not going to use them. They're going to, you know, when you tell your body do this, it's just going to do what it can do, especially as you said, it's hard to work on athletes like myself because like we have very good mind to muscle connection. So we've become very good at telling our bodies to do something and it will find a way to do it. And so that's why slowing down, or really, you know, like you said, they'll compensate for bodybuilders. They'll find a way to do it. Like, yes, they may be like, oh, I don't have this mobility, but I don't care. I'll just do this exercise to grow my shoulder instead of focusing on, well, I don't have this mobility, so let me actually work through this joint movement and this external rotation to actually, again, perform better. So let's use that word, right? Like, I guess like her job would be, I'm trying to get people to perform at their optimal level, not just look their optimal level. And so really getting all your muscle tissue around a joint or around an area to fire so it's fully stable, because like you're saying, if certain muscles aren't firing, that's more work on the joint. So that's why over time you'll start having joint issues, is because well, listen, like remember, you know, you didn't have that mobility, well, you didn't focus on that, so to do that movement your joint or other tissue was being overworked to be able to create that movement. So over time it's going to obviously break it down.
So is this where we get into more like tears in the shoulder? So like one of my biggest, because I lift 5 days a week, and I try to really maintain more of like a lighter weight as far as like what I don't do a lot of like heavy weight exercises, because one of my biggest fears is tearing my rotator cuff or tearing a muscle within my shoulder. That I've seen those shoulder injuries. That's probably one of your more common injuries. Is shoulder. A
lot of shoulders.
What are other ones?
Hip. I feel like you have a lot of hip.
Yeah, a lot of hip.
And then obviously knee
stuff. Low back. I get tons of like low back, neck. I mean,
it's a lot
of spinal. Which I think, you know, in any sports and anything, like the amount of compression we go through, and her and I talk about this a lot, and this is why it's very important, even me as a trainer and her careers, like getting people to understand the importance of rotational training. I mean, look at, you know, how many people do you know actually train rotation?
I don't even know what that means.
It's like literally training rotation. You know, like people do squats, people do deadlifts, people do all these things in a neutral spine position. Well, some not even neutral spine. You know, they're going through
depending on your form,
right? But nobody actually trains rotation. But we rotate all day. Picking up a box, grabbing this water, like we rotate all day, but we're not actually strengthening that movement. So that's why, again, over time, people have back issues or low back. Is well, you just rotated and picked that heavy box up and you never train that. So you're not doing lunges with like a med ball rotation. You know, you're not training. Again, that's more of a dynamic, you know, example, but that's one of the most important movements I feel need to be trained, especially in athletes. I mean, think about baseball, you're rotating all the time. I mean, football, as a quarterback, you're literally backpedaling and rotating your complete spine while you throw a ball. You know, pretty much any sport you think of, when you kick a soccer ball, you're rotating your hips and coming through an explosive movement. Like, you're doing so much rotation, but people don't actually specifically train it in a safe environment to really build on that platform that they do all the time in games.
So. See, this subject's really interesting to me, and that's why I really wanted to bring you on, is because I think a goal for anybody should be longevity.
Definitely.
You know, and you see so much bad form in the gym. You see people pushing weight that they should not be pushing. And you just look at them and you're just like, what are you doing? You're going to hurt yourself. And so, but I've been there.
Yeah.
You know, I've been that new guy in the gym that was just like trying to prove something. You know, my young 16-year-old mind was just like full of testosterone and ego. And I'm just like sitting here trying to lift weight that I shouldn't be lifting.
Totally. Yep.
But as I'm getting older and wiser, turning 30 this year, so you know, I gotta start thinking about like
30's new 20, right?
Yeah, well, for sure. And that's what I you know wanted to like. I want longevity. I want to be healthy. I don't want to just look healthy.
Seriously. Yep.
So for somebody that's coming to you, and you're what does the process look like? So you're talking about, you know, somebody that's wanting to improve their shoulder size or shape or whatever like that.
Okay.
And you're looking at them, and how do you decipher what muscle they're using?
Good luck, Meg.
Properly and not? Like, how do you identify the activated tissue and the unactivated tissue?
Yeah, it's actually a really super controversial kind of thing. Like, there's this whole...
Let's get into it then.
There's this whole education based on like manual muscle therapy, like where we think that we can isolate and test like a specific muscle, or
how the hell do you do that?
Like a specific like quadrant of the muscle.
Why are you shaking your head? Are you disagreeing?
No,
okay.
You'll hear. I'll let Meg take this one, because we actually just had this conversation yesterday with somebody,
the client,
and she was telling the client that, listen, if you, and again, no, you know, anybody out there, just study. I'm not talking down on anybody, but it's just if somebody, we were telling them, if a trainer says, oh yeah, that's definitely your rhomboid, like it's just tight, you need to loosen that. It's like, no, like you could never know that, like, but I'll let you kind of get into that.
The, like, upper division of rhomboid. It's like, how do you know that? Like our bodies are literally like the most complicated, sophisticated machines like on the planet. So like they're like, our bodies are so good at like compensating for things. Like when people ask me questions like you just asked me, like really like in a session, I'm like, I have no idea. Like, but what I have is a set of tools where like I can look at your range of motion, I can look at your quality of motion, which is even more important. And like the range of motion, even like it's based on like what you have available, not based on like something that some textbook tells me you should have like some degrees of range of motion. Like, I don't care about any of that. Like, I want to know what's going on in your body. Like, so if you have, you know, all this range of motion available in your right shoulder, and then in your left shoulder, it's like limited by half, like I'm going to be really concerned about what's going on in that left shoulder. But then there's like, and my shoulders are so complicated. So then there's like the consideration of like, well, okay, like, so why is that happening? Is there something going on like right around like that shoulder joint? Is there something going on in like the stability of your rib cage? Is something going on in the stability of like the
it's all connected
spine?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's all connected. And it was really funny. I found this thing and I showed Chase like this video like a couple weeks ago of like this, like, you know, like a anatomically correct like skeleton, like a, you know.
Actually, maybe we'll send you the link so so the viewers can see what she's talking about.
Yeah, and they kind of like hooked him up where like main like large muscles are, and they move like its pelvis, and as they moved its pelvis, you could see the entire body like move, like the chin tucked and like the feet moved, and like,
so it just showed how all of those things are connected, like, and what it affects
everything.
That's
really
wild.
Like, totally
no, I want to see that. Send me that link. I'll link it below on the video.
Yeah, that'd be really awesome.
Well, I think that's why one of the most optimal movements is plank and probably deadlift. You know, it's like there's so much hip hinge or stabilizing the hip, and again, like through the pelvic and hip, like everything's connected. So when you're trying to, you know, go through a hip hinge to hip extension, it's like with a heavy weight, which again, you know, don't go really heavy, guys. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, but like how it's a compound movement, how it is one of the most optimal performance movements out there, because you're truly moving and activating probably almost everything in your body through that movement.
Okay.
Yeah, like everything in life. I mean, to sit here in this chair, like really everything is interacting together to have me not just like fall out of my chair.
Yeah.
And like it's just something that just happens. We don't even think about it. So that's really like the important.
Ricardo's like, I just want an answer. I think the viewers are thinking that.
No. Because I know there are some questions that just don't have an easy answer.
Yeah, I totally get that it's frustrating and like.
Well, so I'm trying to dissect, because again, I'm coming from it as a person who is genuinely interested in keeping in my body at a high functioning state.
Yeah.
So when we were talking earlier, we were talking about vanity muscles like biceps, triceps, and stuff like that. And you know, I used to have a bicep day, a tricep day, and then like all over, overall arm day. So you know, we'd work bicep, tricep, forearm. You know, just trying to get gorilla arms.
Hey, your arms look great, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was all those years of three arm days a week. And so anyway, I've always been under the understanding, like I loved and hated working out biceps, because biceps, they're such a small muscle, but they're such a vanity muscle. Like, so everybody's trying to get big biceps. But my understanding was always like, this is just a vanity muscle. Like, it's so small. And then you chimed in and were like, well, it's actually a really important. It's not small, and it's really important.
Yeah.
So please elaborate on that, so I can go back to three arm days for function.
Oh man, I mean, so I don't even know where to start. Like, yeah, so like you think, oh, my bicep is just from like here to here, like it's kind of small, like insignificant, like what's the big deal? But like it really like attaches up here, like where your scapula kind of like hooks around, and then it attaches like down into your forearm. So like it's really important for like good like strong shoulders. It's really important for like good strong like elbows, like forearm stability. Like,
that's all I needed. Thank you. Going back to 3 arm days.
Well, and again, it goes back to that whole, you know, every muscle in our body is supporting our joints. You know, it just goes back to, you know, but again, even like when you're doing triceps, it's also still helping going through the eccentric. Yes, you're, you know, contracting the tricep, but it's still also controlling eccentrically to contract the tricep, you know, and that's the thing too. If you have a weak antagonist muscle, antagonist is like, I guess, opposite side, like I'm trying to make it
right.
Where,
so if the bicep and the tricep.
So like for instance, like a lot of people I feel hurt their shoulder when they're doing bench press, not so much because their chest isn't strong enough. It's that, but while you're going through the negative, you know, everything in your posterior, you didn't warm up or activate, so you kind of drop that weight too fast, and then you try to catch it with your chest, but then since you didn't warm up your back, you didn't actually retract. So you're in this protracted position, and all of a sudden that shoulder takes all that, and then you blow your shoulder out. So that's why it's so important when you think about a movement, don't think about just the muscle you're contracting, but also the muscle like antagonist of that you need to warm up as well. That's why it's so important to warm up just that same angle you're going to do with the bench press, but like grab bands and do that pulling and just kind of warm up that movement as well, because the eccentric is just as important, if not more important, than the concentric. You know, you can debate any side, but they've said in studies that that's why bodybuilders lift so slow, that you actually break down more muscle tissue through the eccentric sometimes than through the concentric. But it also depends on, you know, your brain and muscle connection and stuff too. But it's just as important. You know, it's like you see these guys dropping weight and bouncing off their chest.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
like we all know that's just not bad. That's just not good. Like,
looks cool, man.
No, it doesn't even. Like,
and like when you're doing that, like like when you're just letting the weight fall, or like you're pushing and like momentum is moving that weight, like you're not getting any benefit from that, because at that point, like you're not moving that weight anymore. Like your muscles aren't controlling that weight anymore. Like
the guardrail is.
Like,
the guardrail, yes.
Well, at the end of that motion, your guardrail is.
Yeah.
Because you're not controlling it. All of a sudden, you hit, like, the end of, like, your range of motion, and it's like, oh, no, like, we got to catch this thing. But so if you're not actually moving the weight yourself, and, like, gravity is moving the weight for you, like, you're not getting any benefit from that. So, like, it is funny when you see people in the gym and, you know, they've got that 50-pound, like, dumbbell doing their curls, and they're, like, throwing their whole body.
It's a compound movement now,
It's a whole body movement. Bicep curl.
It's like maybe for like 5% of the range of motion you're going through, like you're actually controlling that weight and getting some benefit from it.
Speaking of that, so I don't know if you've ever seen this injury, either one of you, but speaking about the bicep being connected, you know, at 2 points. Have you seen when people tear the bicep from their forearm and it curls up and it's not like there's nothing they can do about it. No. They can't reconnect it.
Yeah.
I used to do like heavy curls, and once I saw that video, I saw a video of a guy doing a curl, and he was down here, and then all of a sudden it just like up into his shoulder. I swear it made that noise. I don't know that it did, but in my mind it made that noise. Like, Oh, I get
Yeah.
goosebumps.
It was like the little toy that you like.
And that's when I was like,
back up.
yeah, no, I'm never doing heavy bicep curls ever again. Have you seen that injury before?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a swimmer. He's a master swimmer.
What
He's
happened?
in his 70s. Just swimming one day, and
Yeah.
there it goes.
Is there anything you can do to prevent that? Like, what happens?
Yeah, for sure. Like, my answers are going to be all the same. Like, getting your system functioning really well, like as good as you can. And like, it's hard for me to answer your questions like that, like in a specific way, because it's so individual specific.
Right.
So let's take the bicep, for instance. If somebody said, just for my bicep, you know, and they can't even they feel tightness just when they go into full extension. Like, again, there's so much other connective tissue.
Are there precursors to that? Like that precursors to that injury?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Like there's unless there's like a massive trauma, like people that are in car accidents or things like that, like who knows what those people had going on in their bodies, but definitely in my mind, like there's been weaknesses happening around those joints probably for a really long time to have that tendon like start to fray to the point that it just like tears right off the bone. I mean, our body's pretty good at like using the other muscles available to help out like when something starts to get injured like that. And I mean, I even have a guy right now, another swimmer. He's a master swimmer, and he's got like a calcification happening in the tendon of his bicep just from having the shoulder thing that's been going on for far too long. And the body, like to try to reinforce that connection point, his body started to lay down calcium into that tendon to try to strengthen it to avoid that thing from tearing off his bone. So, and like there's research that shows too, like with appropriate training, like where the muscle grows out of the bone, like that attachment site, like the tendon, that part of the bone actually will become thicker to help reinforce. Like,
that's wild.
Yeah, so like that's one of the things that's really important, to be lifting, to be moving like heavy weight that's appropriate for you, and to just always like remain active, because it helps, I mean, like so many things, but if for one thing, like it helps keep your bones really strong.
Yeah.
I have a woman, she's 97 years old. I've worked with her, I think this is my 15th year, and she works out with a trainer 3 times a week, and she swims every single day.
That's amazing.
And like, she's getting some dementia, like she's 97,
right?
But like she'll
That's
fall.
awesome.
Like she took a huge fall last summer, like broke nothing, like.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I know I've heard so many scientists, so many doctors talk about the importance of physical activity throughout your entire life, and so that just makes sense. I mean, my grandfather's. He's coming up on 90, and he doesn't own a car. He lives in Puerto Rico, and he walks everywhere, and he's in great health. Yeah. Like, you can see it. You just see people that become sedentary, and then their health goes. Yeah.
I watch it happen a lot in my practice. Like there's a marked difference in like the people just that I work with that have just always been active, and then the ones that just always have not. Like, even that's like a different conversation. But say like someone retires, or like someone has like a big injury and they let that like stop them, and it's just really crazy like how quickly like the body starts to like break down. Like, and it's not even like, I guess it's not even like a bad thing. It's just kind of what happens. Like our bodies want to be so efficient. Like our bodies want to put resources into like what's most important. So as soon as you stop using something regularly, like you can lose it pretty quick. Like even like bone density, like they've done some studies on like people that, have had surgery or something like that, and they're bedridden for like 6 weeks. And I won't quote the exact percentage, but it was like, oh my gosh, like how much their bone density reduced just in like those 6 weeks. And it's like, come on, this is so crazy but it's just our bodies wanting to put resources into what is really
where it
important.
needs it. Yeah.
So I'm actually curious. And so guys, I'm not teeing Meg up. I actually am curious. So, because again, I do this for a living. So like, Meg and I working together, sometimes it's, we've been friends before this injury. So, I've learned a lot from Meg. And, But, for the viewer out there that maybe, doesn't come from my background, doesn't do this for a living, isn't constantly, obsessing about educating and learning these things, what is something, if there is something that they could take from this as far as, I do want more bone density, or I don't want to hurt myself. What are ways, or what are simple tests, I guess, they could do to find that, oh man, I do have weakness. And, like for instance, we found with me that, guys, one of my biggest weaknesses would be external rotation in my right leg, and then going through elevation, or flexion, I guess I should say. So that's when I'm laying on my back, lift my leg up, externally rotate my toes out. It's all of a sudden my leg's like, nah, I'm good. And I think you're in that position all the time when you're snowboarding. So I had to really strengthen that position, because I'm trying to contract all my muscle tissue in an external position. So like we found that, but like, I guess, what are some ways people can maybe try to find their weaknesses so that they can have longevity?
Yeah.
Is that a tough question?
It's totally a tough question.
Yeah.
I mean, even for somebody like you, who's really aware of their body, like, we're not very good at knowing where we are, like, in space.
Because we don't like to humble ourselves.
Well, not even that. It's just not something a lot of people are really good at. And I actually have a colleague that is trying to create a program just like that to help you. Well,
dissect that, I guess.
Him. It still is always like, like I evaluate people. Like when people come to me as like a new client, like there's a whole evaluation process, and part of that process is checking out their range of motion and like taking.
Yeah, when I first met Meg, I'd call her the humble coach, because you're an athlete, you're strong, and then she's like, cool, so I'm gonna break you. And it's like, awesome. You can deadlift 495 pounds, but then I can't even apply 10 pounds of pressure and external rotation through my leg, and I'm like, what? Like she literally just like, and I'm like trying to push against her, and my leg just falls. And
so
it's like,
okay, so that's a good question. So what does it look like if I were to come to you and just be like, I want to identify my weak points?
Yeah.
What are some of the steps that you would take to do that?
So first I start with like just a general intake, and I try to get as good an understanding of like your history as possible. Like I want to know about like your earliest injuries, like if you can recall, like,
sports you did, so that
like falling off your bike and your brother pushed you off a trampoline, and like I kind of want to know about that stuff, and like how you injured yourself. Like those things gone unaddressed, like over time, like often are kind of the source of people's issues when they come to me, like as adults. So we go through that. We spend a lot of time with that, and then I look at your range of motion, usually like with you just kind of standing, and I just want to see like, while you're standing, like, is one shoulder raised, like is one leg turn out, something like that. And then
so you look at the symmetry of the body. Okay.
Yep, from the front, the back, both
Do you
sides.
do that while they're just standing, or while they're lifting as well, or?
Nope, just standing.
Okay.
And then I get you on the treatment table, and we go through like a range of motion evaluation where you're actively moving your body. So like when you first lay down, again, like I kind of take note of like, where is your body?
Like, how do you lay? Do you lay and your feet naturally
like,
externally rotate,
Or does one really externally rotate and the other one doesn't? Or, is one shoulder raised? Or is your head like cocked to one side? Things like that. And then I have you start moving. Okay. And they're really specific movements. And I mean, that's by design. Like I want to see how you move, if there's any discomfort, and then really to compare like side to side for you. And, I have this big whiteboard in my room, and I take tons of notes. And then I just kind of look at those notes at the end of that evaluation and see, like, there will be patterns in your body. Like, if you have, like, a pelvic tilt, like, there will be, like, different rotations in your legs that'll kind of indicate that, like, I can't see it under your skin, but maybe your pelvis is in this particular position, or your rib cage and things like that. So I just kind of put that stuff together. And then, it just depends on everybody. Like, if there was like discomfort somewhere, or like a really big discrepancy in the range of motion, then I decide like where I'm going to start like working with you. And I mean, a lot of times it depends on everybody, but a lot of times there's at least 2 or 3 sessions. Like if you're like an athlete, you're in pretty good shape, you don't have any major injuries or things like that, you still probably spend like your first 2 or 3 sessions with me, like just in my treatment room before we go out in the gym. And a lot of times, like, I mean, Chase is at the gym a lot when I'm there, and like, a lot of times like I never even get out really into the gym, like on like
you don't need
serious
to.
equipment with people, because a lot of times like I'm looking for like your weakest link, you know, so
because again, if you apply too much force, your body will compensate. So she'll actually do things with like 5 or 10% amount of force, because she is trying at her best ability just to use a certain area. Again, you can't just contract a specific muscle, because other things have to assist with that movement. But she will try to get your body to just, you know, again, contract through. She'll even tell you, really focus. I'm going to do this. I want you to try to apply force through this joint. You know, because again, if you press really hard, my quad's going to take over everything else. I'm going to contract my abs. I'm going to turn this way. You know, I'm going to do everything to get me to do that explosively. Because again, we are compensators.
Yeah, we're just compensating.
You know, our bodies. I mean, you know, again, it can go to diet, anything. Our bodies are built. That's why she said we're the most complex things. We are built to adapt. We will adapt to what we want to do. Our body will just do it. So when you apply just as little pressure as possible, and she's saying don't move anything else, then all of a sudden, that's why I said it's the humble coach.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
it's really hard to train people to do that.
Yeah, I'm
especially
sure.
Athletes are the hardest, because they're so good at compensating. But like if I'm in the place that I really need to be, and I'm specific enough about how I'm getting you into the position and like what direction I'm having you press, like most of the resistance I provide for my clients is just my own strength, or you know, I have a couple little resistance bands like in my treatment room, stuff like that. But it's not at that point, like I don't need to be out in the gym with people. And then a lot of times, like if it is at the point where like they need to be like lifting heavier weight, like that's when it's great that I have a relationship with Chase and I just hand them off. Like like I can do that stuff, like I'm really great at it, but like the thing that I really love to do the most is more of like, it's by no means like rehab, but kind of that end of it. Like I want to find like I like the puzzle of it. Like, okay, like you have this thing that's like keeping you from doing what you really love in your life, and
or
it's causing you all this pain, or like really hitting like that next goal for you. Like, what's that?
That's got to be
like,
a lot of fun.
I want to find that. And then I hand you off to like the guy who's like the adventure trainer.
Right.
Like, it's such a perfect.
it's
such a perfect little collaboration that we have.
We'll take like you know, and there's a show out there that kind of does it, where he, you know, the sports science show, where he breaks down like certain, like, I'll use this for instance, Richard Sherman, you know, he's one of the cornerbacks for Seattle, right? So this is why he has, for 3 seasons, he had the most interceptions of any cornerback. And he also was one of the #1 cornerbacks in the league. Is he actually had like 8-degree more spinal rotation while running than any quarterback or any cornerback, which means when he's in a dead sprint running towards the defender, he can rotate further to actually see the ball. Where other people that don't have the neck rotation and spinal rotation, they can't ever see the ball. So you see those guys that can't make that turn, they just put their hands up. Right? So they're never able to make an action at the ball, where he has that rotation. And again, maybe it's just genetically he was built to have more rotation, or maybe he trained it.
Actually,
we don't know, you know, but there is ways to actually train your body to have more spinal rotation through that movement. So that's where, yes, I'm an adventure trainer, and you know, she works with people, but also it's just understanding the biomechanics of the body and how, based on what your goal is, like if, especially young athletes, if your goal is to be professional at being a catcher, at being a pitcher, it's not just baseball, it's what position do you play? You know, a quarterback, I'm going to train a quarterback in football and a corner or a safety completely different. Because like the movements they go through in a game, like he's repetitively backpedaling and then, you know, extending his shoulder in this position, you know, constantly throughout a game. Or again, he's having to turn his head to actually see all the defenders. And like, because again, if he's back turned this way and he has very little neck rotation, he may not see that wide receiver if he's open. So he just kind of throws it because he thinks he should be there instead of really seeing it. And I know that's very specific, but you know what I mean? Like,
no,
that's where it takes like going to that next level of like, yes, I can train you, but what do you specifically, what is your purpose? What are you trying to perform at? And that's where, again, her and I work together as far as like, yes, we need to find your weaknesses, but we also need to know, based on your lifestyle, what are you repetitively doing a lot? Because that's also going to be also being broken down a lot. So again, mountain climbing, a ton of hip flexion constantly for hours. You're just going, it's not like it's an explosive sport. It's just, you're going through knee up and pressing with 60 pounds on your back. And so you're compressing your spine, right? You got to think about all these things, and then you're doing it for 11 hours to summit your mountain. And then all of a sudden you're turning around and now you're decelerating for 8 hours. You know, and people don't train deceleration. That's why baseball players go to slide and they change their mind about sliding, they tear a hamstring because they're going at a full sprint and they don't ever train stopping. You know, and so again, it's just things like really taking the time for trainers out there, you know, really taking the time to like really understand what they're repetitively doing, but also taking the time to understand, well, what could go wrong? And if they're ever in this position that it could go wrong, that their muscles and joints and everything are ready to take that impact to put them in the best position to prevent
so you're playing defense and offense at the same time.
Exactly. And that's a great way to put it.
Right.
You know, it's, yes, you want to play offense, like, because again, we have a lot of athletes that are super explosive this way, and all of a sudden I'll say, great, now I want you to immediately go into a lateral, like while you're sprinting, stop and go lateral, and they're like, what? Their body's like, what do you mean? I can't do that. Because again, we always train this direction,
right? Or
maybe this direction. We never train really laterally or rotationally. And I think that's just that little line right there really separates a high school athlete to a pro athlete. You know, like really extending on your training to really understand what your body's doing every single week in a game.
So I get that this is like this whole, what you do in this whole type of therapy is really, really specific to the user or to the person. But are there overall like basics that people can keep in mind, or things that they can do to improve system function that they can implement in their daily lives that would work across the board for most people?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like just staying active in a way that feels good for you to stay active, and like not necessarily one thing. You know, like there's people that love to play tennis, and they play so much tennis that then they end up with like repetitive stress injuries and things like that. So like maybe you play tennis, but then you do like some of your own training, like whether it's like by yourself or with a trainer or something like that, but just like keeping active. And like if you have something that is bothersome, like get to somebody who can like address it. Like don't let those things just go.
Work through them.
Yeah,
that's a hard thing for guys too.
Like, no pain, no gain. I'm just gonna work through this thing. Like no, it doesn't work like that. Like don't do that.
It's
if there's pain, you're probably gonna eventually have no gain.
Well, there's a very specific like feeling of like, okay, I just really worked my muscles and I injured something. You can tell. Like there is there's a marked difference between those two.
For sure.
Okay, so diversity in your physical training and in the sports that you take or that you do. What else?
And having that be appropriate for you and like where you're
so specific.
at.
Yeah.
Okay. So like
into your body, what you do on a daily basis.
So like so you don't want an 89-year-old guy going and playing football.
Totally. So you know, like group fitness things are kind of tough because there's a lot of this, and so there's like that competitiveness that takes over, and like, oh, you know, the person next to me is like doing it harder, faster, heavier, whatever. Like really working to overcome that, like for yourself. Like I'm just gonna do what feels really good for me. And if you have something that consistently is like really sore, or like I say this to people like this, like so if you have something that you do and you like to do it, it's something active, that's great. If you consistently feel better when you do it, then like great, do it. If you consistently feel worse, stop. Then great. Like nothing is all good or all bad.
So just listen to your body is basically okay. So what's another thing?
I think talk about isometrics. I feel like people take that for granted a lot.
Explain isometrics for everybody. I totally know what that is, but other people don't.
Muscle contraction, like where you don't actually look like you're moving, but you're still contracting the tissue. And it's totally something that's really overlooked and is really like a really great, like easy, like safe way to get your muscle system like activated, we'll say, but really keeping that tissue like contracting well. And I mean,
it's like an example would be like take a leg extension. You know, when you do your leg extension, you're going through dynamic. Isometric would be, okay, I'm going to lift this leg extension and out through a full contraction. So with my leg fully extended, knee locked out, I'm going to now contract my quad and try to hold that at the top for 20 seconds. And again, it's a great way to find out, are you using momentum or are your muscles like strong? Because again, you may get 15 reps with 120 pounds, but okay, now I want you to drop. So guys at home, just try this. 120 pounds, right? Maybe do 120 pound leg extensions for 10, 15 reps. Today, I want you to go to the gym, or your next leg day. Hopefully you do leg day. And Ricardo. And next thing, drop it to like 40 pounds, if that, and do a leg extension. And just hold it and try to contract your quad as hard as you can for 20, 30 seconds. I promise you 10, 15 seconds in, you're going to be shaking and you're going to be like, holy crap. And again, that's a great way to train muscle endurance, but also I think it is a great way to see what is weaker in your body. Like my right leg, maybe do them single. My right leg didn't start shaking until 22 seconds, but my left one started shaking at 12. Okay, so when you're doing both legs on squat or whatever, your right leg is compensating more probably through that movement because it's technically stronger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely.
Isometrics are a great way to find places that need assistance or strength.
And then really you can add in like different levels of effort. So like, especially for people that are athletes, like doing an isometric with really gentle pressure can be so much harder than like giving it full effort.
Right.
So like play around with like your level of effort too. And if you find that spot that feels really hard, it feels really shaky, it feels really weak, like that's where you want to spend a little extra time. Like train the stuff that you don't like to train so much. Like there's probably a reason you don't like to train that so much. Like a lot of our exercise routines are very ego driven, and to try to eliminate that as much as possible and kind of go for that stuff that doesn't make us feel like such a rock star and like focus on those things. I think is one of the other like really like important pieces. Like
perfect.
Not a ton of weight, not a ton of speed.
And I'm learning that, you know, as I'm getting older and wiser, you know, I'm learning that it's not all about the weight that's on the bar and what other people think. Oh man, that guy's lifting so much. But like the whole point is to be healthy. The whole point is to do
can
this.
Lift so much. Like like a year ago, I took on like powerlifting with Chase, and like I love it. And people are like, you're that thing, that kind of weight, like doesn't it go against like everything you know? I'm like, no, not at all. It's just another piece of it. And like, you know, a testament to like the work, like the man, I don't know how to say it, but like my whole philosophy around like how I choose to work, like my thought process on how I choose to work is like, you know, I was an athlete, I played basketball, like I thought for sure, like I dreamed my whole life that I'd play college basketball, and then I was injured, and you know, I went through that whole thing. And then I've been in a couple of like pretty serious car accidents. I've got a bunch of herniated discs and like all of this stuff going on in my body. Like those things haven't healed.
Right.
And yet like day to day, like I have no pain. Like I'm really strong. Like, you know, I don't look like your typical athlete, but like I'm strong and my system is solid and I'm healthy. And you know, that is not typical for people that have like the injury history that I have. So like I say that to people a lot, like, hey, look, like if I can do what I love to do, like we totally can get you doing what you want to do too. It's all just about like getting that muscular system like contracting well on demand and keeping that going, like building up your strength and your endurance like where you need it so you can do what you love forever.
That's and I think that's a great spot to end this thing. This has been super interesting, and I want to talk more about this. I may have to bring you back on another one or something, get a little bit deeper. But at least we could start with those practical steps. Well, it was incredible to have you on, Chase. As always, it's always great to have you. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much.